Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to Power and Parsha. This week is Parshas Mishpatim. This week's Torah portion has a lot of laws. In the aftermath of last week's Torah portion, where we were given the Ten Commandments, the revelation at Sinai, this week picks up with a lot of laws, and primarily laws that are civil laws, social laws, societal laws, laws of torts, and laws of social interaction with other people, responsibilities, moral responsibilities, and so on. I would like to focus on two of the verses, one from actually the last verse of today's reading, from the last verse in the fifth Torah reading, the fifth aliyah of the Parsha, and one from tomorrow's Torah reading. And there's a very famous teaching in the Baal Shem Tov. I'm going to share my screen. We're going to try something new this week. And the Torah is talking about responsibility that we have for each other. And the verse says, Kisira, so this is Exodus 23:5. Kisira, if you will see, Chamor, the donkey, Seinacha of your enemy, Revetz tachas masoi, lying under its burden, V'chadalta me'azovla, you will refrain from helping it. Azov tazevima, you must surely help it. So there's a lot in this verse. We've talked about it actually in a number of classes in the past as well. But on the simple level, the verse is saying that if you encounter your enemy's donkey struggling under a burden that was placed on it, it was carrying its burden and it was too heavy and was struggling, you might think that since it's the donkey of your enemy, you're going to ignore it, pretend you don't see it, and move on with your life. Says the Torah, no, you have to help your enemy, and you have to help the donkey of your enemy, and help him with his burden. The Baal Shem Tov, in the Hayom Yom from yesterday, actually is quoted as saying that a deeper reading of this verse suggests something very personal and relevant. Kisir, if you're going to look into chamor, not the donkey, but chamor meaning the materialism of the corporeal nature of your physical body. And if you look into it, you'll see Seinacha, that it is in fact your enemy, that your body and your bodily needs seem on the surface to be the enemy of your soul, of your godly soul that wants to serve God. Your body has its material needs, physical needs, and lusts and desires and interests and pursuits, whereas the godly soul wants to serve God. And so they seem to be at odds, and the body, particularly the material nature of the body, it seems to be the enemy. Says the verse, so it's your enemy, and your enemy is Revetz tachas masoi. It is struggling, it's lying under its burden, meaning that the godly soul is trying to pull it into the service of God and refine it and elevate it and sensitize it, and the body is resistant to it. The body is lazy, doesn't want to go be dragged to the synagogue, doesn't want to go do a mitzvah, doesn't want to do any of those things that it finds difficult or that it finds to be challenging to its own pursuits. Why give charity if I can keep more money for myself, and so on? So the body is resistant to the spiritual pursuits of the godly soul, and it's struggling under that burden, the burden that it feels placed upon it, this idea of refining it and elevating it. So one might think, cut your losses, and maybe you should mortify the body, right? And that was certainly something that was very prevalent in the times of the Baal Shem Tov, who taught this close to 300 years ago, that the way to spiritual enlightenment and the way to refinement and self-actualization in the spiritual sense was to ignore, neglect, and mortify the body, to abuse the body, and to live an ascetic lifestyle. So says the Torah, while your instinct might be to neglect or even to harm your body, the God commands us that, to the contrary, we need to help the body along. You need to refine it and not break it through mortification. Okay, so this is a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, a very foundational idea in Hasidic philosophy, that the body, while seemingly seems to be the enemy, rather than reject it and rather than abuse it and harm it, we need to elevate it and work with it. Okay, so that's one verse, and that's one teaching, one Hasidic teaching, which will give us some insight into a kind of strange wording in another verse later on in the chapter, Exodus 23, verse 12, where the Torah is telling us about keeping the Shabbos, keeping the sabbatical year, and then it says about keeping Shabbos. It says, the verse says, Sheishes Yamim, for 6 days, Tasa Masecha, you may do your work. But on the 7th day, Tishbais, you shall rest. Laman Yanuach Shorcha v'chamerecha, in order that your ox and your donkey shall rest. and your maidservant's son and the stranger shall be refreshed. Okay, so something curious about this verse. The verse is clearly telling us work for 6 days and rest on the seventh. Right, and parenthetically, the idea is that just as we're required to rest on the seventh day on the Shabbos, we're also required to work for 6 days. I refer you all to our class from last night, our JLI class. Look for it in the email for more on that topic of working for 6 days and resting on the seventh. But the words here in the verse are strange, right? Why do we rest on Shabbos? We know the Torah tells us in the Ten Commandments, we read it last week, you rest on Shabbos because God created the world in 6 days and rested on the seventh. Why do we rest on Shabbos? Another reason in the second version of the Ten Commandments, because God took us out of Egypt. So therefore we commemorate by resting on Shabbos. So we worked for 6 days, we rest on Shabbos for that commemoration, right? And the rest includes all of our property has to rest as well. So our beasts of burden, our ox and our donkey also have to rest. They can't work the field. They can't carry burdens and transport things for us. They have to be able to rest on that day as an extension of our resting on that day because we're commemorating God's taking us out of Egypt or God creating the world in 6 days and resting on the seventh. But the verse says it words it differently. The verse says, work for 6 days and rest on the seventh. Why should you rest on the seventh? In order that your ox and your donkey shall rest. So it's as if the reason for Shabbos is to give your ox and your donkey a rest, to give it a break. Based on what we said before, this insight from the Baal Shem Tov on the verse, verse 5, we can come to understand something here. In addition to the fact that our body, our material self, is referred to as chamor, or from the word chomer, right, which means material, matter, physical matter. We also have different types of personalities, different types of bodies. There are some people who are more like an ox, more passionate, intense. Then there are people who are more like a chamor, more like a donkey, calmer, colder, cooler. Now, the truth is we all have all of these types of personality traits. We're all nuanced and complex beings. But some people you find are more passionate. Some people are more dispassionate. Some people are more intense. Some people are more laid back. And so while we all possess all of these different qualities, generally speaking, a person will tend to express one of these and many other types of character traits. And so what the Torah is telling us is that for 6 days we work on our personality and our character. We need to be able to redirect it, right? We know already from the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov that it's not about if I have a certain personality type, as my body, my material self, my material drives lead me in a certain direction, and maybe that direction is at odds with my spiritual pursuits, with my godly soul. Like we said, it might be my enemy. Our job is to redirect it. You're a passionate person, take that passion, redirect it from sinful desires, and bring that passion into your divine service. Maybe you can pray passionately. You seem to be cold and indifferent. Rather than be indifferent when it comes to studying Torah or doing a mitzvah, be indifferent when it comes to being harmful to somebody else. Redirect that personality quality and channel it in a positive way. So all week we have to work on ourselves. We've got to work on our ox and our donkey, our chamor and our shor. We need to be able to work on them, heal them, redirect them, channel them, refocus them, refine them. But then Shabbos comes. What's Shabbos? On Shabbos, that's when we rest. On Shabbos, we're reminded that we are good exactly as we are. We are beautiful and perfect exactly the way, and we are exactly the way God made us. So yes, we have this challenge that we have to work with our own internal struggles, our own desires, with all of our parts, and move all of our parts, redirect them towards God. But come Shabbos, we have to remember that we're also okay to accept exactly who we are, exactly the challenges God has given us. Take a break, take a rest. Know that you are who you are, accept who you are, recognize that you are good enough exactly as you are for God. And when we can do that, when we can accept all those parts, when we can accept, we can look into ourselves and see, I see that ox inside of me, or maybe I see that donkey inside of me. I see those other qualities that I wish to hide and ignore. Accept that this is a part of you, accept that this is how God created you. Rest on that day, take it all in, and then after Shabbos, you get to work and refocus yourself on healing those parts, redirecting those parts, refining those parts, and directing them towards God, towards a higher, perfected sense of self.